Brought to you by PrayLatin.com, makers of prayer cards featuring complete English phonetic renderings of Latin pronunciations.
There is a canary in the coal mine for the state of the church, and that is the apostasy in the church, the number of Catholics leaving. And it manifests itself in a way that is becoming more and more apparent in the lives of Catholics. The vocations crisis that we've all heard endlessly talked about for a very long time. But in some places, this vocation crisis is, well, the word crisis doesn't begin to do what's happening justice. A more appropriate term would be apocalyptic. There are simply no seminarians or no men who are being ordained to the priesthood in some dioceses. This can't go on. And this isn't isolated to any one place in the church. This is across the Western Church, the Latin Church. We're going to look at this issue today and what the underlying cause of this is. And no, this isn't going to be a blame Vatican II fest. You already know my feelings on Vatican II, probably. We're going to talk about how we got here, because there's another issue here, and it has to do with the access to the sacraments. So let's begin by going to the Republic of Ireland. And from Times.com, we get this headline. Dearth of new priests is a cross to bear for the Catholic Church. With just a single student vying to enter the Catholic priesthood in Dublin, a reform of the ordination system is being mooted. Now, we already have heard endlessly about this push to ordain women and all this stuff, and how Francis says no, very publicly says no, but then flirts with the movement behind the ordination of women. And many have speculated that he's going to just go against what he just said recently in that now famous 60 Minutes interview. But that's not what this is about here. There's a whole lot of other talk about changing ordination as well. The whole viri probati thing, a whole lot of different things being discussed. But at the core of this is the quiet apostasy going on. I remember a few months ago, a lot of people were shocked by some details I had, but publicly we're told that in the United States, about 20 to 30% of Catholics go to Mass regularly being more than once a month. And among those who go every single week, that number is closer to 15 to 20%. Well, it turned out that some people did some cell phone data tracking, and they found that number is closer to 4 to 8% in the United States. Now, some disputed that, finding the methodology troubling, but it is probably true that the number is lower than we actually think it is. And that gets to the crux of this problem. There's an apostasy happening, and in Ireland, it's sort of what's coming for the United States and other places. They just got to where they have a very bad situation before the rest of us did, as this you'll hear in this article. So from the article, quote, just one man is studying to enter the Catholic priesthood in Dublin, it has emerged. Father Seamus McEntee, vocations director for the Archdiocese of Dublin, confirmed that the stark number was indicative of a broader, quote, crisis of faith in the capital. There are almost 1 million Catholics in 197 parishes in Dublin in total, 2 of which were forced to merge last week owing to a lack of priests. It's September, we will have another man coming in. I wish there were more, McEntee said. There was a stage when I think it was seen to be a crisis when the number fell below 100. The shortage of practicing Catholics is felt in the pulpit and the pews of Dublin churches. St. Francis Xavier Catholic Church on Gardner Street, just a stone's throw from O'Connell Street, was subsumed into the pro-cathedral parish last week in a move that members of the clergy have conceded was symbolic of increasingly secular times and of a further decline to come. End quote. And the further decline to come is because the church does not combat the rising tide of secularism. It no longer does. In fact, it flirts with secularism itself. So you're seeing that in the synodal way. You're seeing that in the documents like Fratelli Tutti and Amoris Laetitia and Fiducia Supplicans. When the church isn't actually acting as an alternative to the evils in the world, what do you think is going to be the net consequence of that? People will leave the faith. They won't see the point to it anymore. Now, this article goes on to describe this leading to parish mergers, outreach into quote-unquote new arrivals in Ireland to find the Catholics among them, and a great reduction in available sacraments, with baptism and other sacramental services being transferred to that parish cathedral they mentioned already. We're familiar with that in the United States. Some dioceses have a really bad situation on their hands there. For example, my personal experience with this was visiting a friend in New Jersey about a decade ago, going to Mass with them in the morning, and their priest would offer 5 Masses at 5 parishes that day. One wonders how anybody's confessions were heard, because how would a priest have the time to hear confessions if he's going to 5 parishes in one day to offer 5 Masses? So we already have some of this in the United States, and Chicago is infamous for the parish mergers. And Chicago is a fairly Catholic town. There's a large number of Irish Catholics there, as well as Catholics from other backgrounds. This vocations crisis is here already, and it's partially because the church has stopped trying to combat secularism. Now, there's another elephant in the room here, and this article is not addressing it. Dublin has about 1 million Catholics in its population. Ireland, overall, has lost a staggering amount of the faithful. In 2006, 90% of Irish self-identified as Catholic. Now that's closer to 60% today. That's part of the springtime in the church that we're constantly told about. There is no springtime, folks, only quiet apostasy. And that is the reason for the collapse in vocations. When combined with the institutionalized lukewarmness in the church, few Catholics are staying in the church or believing what the faith always taught on any number of issues you care to name. That attitude does not create a fertile environment for vocations. It dries them up. Vocations usually happen in the families that go to Mass the most often, families that pray together, families where these things are discussed openly, where the mother and the father make personal sacrifices quietly as offerings to our Lord for vocations. That's usually where you get these from. If you want to know what a healthy parish looks like, by the way, not only is it loud with many small children there, but it's also one that has frequent adoration available. The more frequent, the better. With the healthiest typically having 24-hour perpetual adoration available. And I've seen this available in bad neighborhoods, parishes located in not terribly pleasant places. That's how you fix this problem. That's where it begins. But it also begins at the ambo, where the priest stands up and preaches sometimes unpleasant things to the faithful. And the faithful have to be willing to actually hear the message. So all too often we hear stories about, oh, my priest said things that conflicted with my political sensibilities, so I got up and left. How many times have you heard that before? Happens all the time. I'll give you another case in point about this. We get this headline from Die Tagespost, which is a mainstream faith-friendly news outlet in Germany. Wohlbold. Confession is practically dead in Germany. The sacrament of penance plays only a marginal role in the identity of most priests, says the Munich pastoral theologian in an interview with the Tagespost. Yes, few Catholics in Germany go to confession anymore, which means there is a scourge of sacrilegious communions happening every single day in that country. But it's not the laity who are primarily to blame here, according to this theologian, who I don't know what he believes on any other thing else. He could be a full-blown synodalist for all I know. But he notes that confession is not happening, and that is a massive problem. And he says it's not the laity to blame here. It's the priests themselves. They're either spread too thin or don't think it's worth their time to hear confessions. Think about that one for a moment. From the article, quote, the Munich pastoral theologian Andreas Wohlbold has criticized the collapse of the practice of confession in Germany. Apart from a few exceptions, confession is simply dead in Germany, he explained in an interview with this newspaper. In order to win over believers on a broad scale to the rediscovery of the sacrament, you have to break through a lot of barriers. This can only be achieved in a very targeted manner and with a lot of perseverance. According to Wohlbold, the sacrament of penance plays only a marginal role in the identity of most priests. The Munich pastoral theologian said, this is not good because in addition to the authority to celebrate the Eucharist, the authority to forgive sins is the priest's great unique selling point. But for that to happen, the clergy probably have to rediscover the power of the sacrament themselves. Wohlbold strongly supported traditional forms such as devotional confession. Devotional confession, or simply regular confession, has become almost exclusively the practice of those who live seriously. It has become an indispensable element of spiritual growth, but also of overcoming deep-seated sinful tendencies, he says. End quote. What state does your parish have to be in when devotional confession, meaning the normal confession, isn't even offered anymore, where priests have to rediscover it? This is Germany, where their bishops have been focused on a synodal church, their synodal way, which is a slightly more radical version of what's going on in Rome. How far gone does this have to be? This apostasy that we're seeing is the fault of leadership, because they don't want to preach the Catholic faith. That secularizing force in the world long since entered the church. And its prophets in this false religion are many of the bishops themselves. That is the simple fact. And until they start to lead, you're not going to have confession coming back. If you don't have regular confession available, where are you going to get your vocations? Not to mention all those sacrilegious communions that are happening every single day in the church in Germany if confession is not offered very often. Let me know what you think about this in the comments, please. Like and subscribe if you haven't. It does help. So to sharing this on social media, that helps too. If you like content like this, consider becoming a supporter of Return to Tradition. Got options in the description box below, as well as that join button. It does help keep these daily messages coming. And as always, pray for the church. I'm Anthony Stine. Ave Maria.